Welcome back, and just reflecting on the fact that I don't care how many times I've been through the book of Romans, I read it regularly, I meditate through it, I've memorized big portions of it, but whenever I come to this book, I'm just stirred, I'm thrilled, I'm humbled, I'm motivated. This book has just got such an effect. And I hope it's having that effect on you as you reason through and think through it. These are not just words on a page. These are the very words of God being brought to us by means of a human being, the Apostle Paul, who is being moved by the Holy Spirit so that what he writes are the very words of God to us. And in this section, we've been talking about Israel's human culpability, the reasons they rejected God from a human perspective. Today we're going to look at verses 5 to 11. They rejected God's grace and salvation. I'm not going to read through this section. I have it on the screen here. It's a little bit longer, so I'm just going to walk through it. I would encourage you to right now stop the video for a moment, just put it on pause while you read through this section, verses 5 to 11, so you can get the big picture before I break it down. So if you did that, welcome back. Let's go through this. Notice in verse 5, he talks about for Moses' rights. So Paul is reasoning from the scriptures here, as we all should. He's alluding to Leviticus 18:5, which is in the law, right? He's relying on what Moses wrote in the law. This is the law. If you look at the context there, the law is presented as a way to separate God's people from the ungodly around them, from the Egyptians and from the Canaanites. Paul uses this again in Galatians 3:12, the same verse, in that sister companion. A lot of people think it's a sister companion of Romans, Galatians 3:12. To make the same point, the law is not of faith. On the contrary, the person who performs them, that is the laws, will live by them. So Paul makes this point that the law had a purpose, and the purpose was to separate God's people from the ungodly around them. He goes on in verses 6 and 7 again, says righteousness is based on faith. Well, he doesn't, where does Paul say that, I guess, or where does Moses say that? He doesn't tell us directly, but we could look up Deuteronomy 30, verse 12. And this is where he says, do not say in your heart, who will go up into heaven, that is to bring Christ down, or who will descend into the abyss. What Paul is saying here is that if you look in those sections, is loving obedience rather than adherence to the law is the approach to earning justification. I use earning carefully, not to say that it's a work and we earn our justification, but to say that it is belief, that it's by belief, a loving obedience, a trust, a confidence in God is what leads us to our justification. Verse 8, I love what he says here. What does it say? Here he quotes Deuteronomy 30, verse 14. So look what he's done here. He's looked at Leviticus. He's looked at Deuteronomy. He's using the law, which was never meant to save or sanctify. He's using that to demonstrate that it was never meant to save or sanctify. Verse 14, he's quoting Deuteronomy 30, verse 14 and verse 8. He's saying pleasing God is not beyond the reach of anyone. It's not beyond the ability of everyone. Rather, faith toward God is available to all. That's what Paul is saying here. This is grace, to offer salvation not based on works, but just by trusting. God is as if he's saying is the law has its purpose, the law has its ways, and the law has its meaning. But what I'm really teaching you in the law is to depend on me. Just by depending on me, righteousness is available to you. Paul goes on here. He brings the law to bear as a witness that justification is by faith. In other words, he's saying Israel had this. They always knew it. They had the oracles of God. And he's explaining the implication of the law of the Pentateuch for them. He's saying you should have gotten this. You should have understood. And you didn't. You were willfully ignorant. And Paul goes on here, verses 9 to 10. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. This is the message of the Old Testament. Believe and be saved. This is the message of Paul's gospel. That's what he's preaching. That's what he's talking about. Verse 8, he makes it clear. That is the word of faith which we are preaching. The word of faith is not some sort of name it and claim it scheme to make you rich. Rather, the name it and claim it that Paul's talking about here is confessing with your mouth, believing in your heart. That's what Paul's talking about. For the Jew particularly, Jesus told them how their alienation from him will come to an end. He went through Matthew chapter 23, condemning the Pharisees and the scribes, particularly the Pharisees, for leading the nation astray. And then he turns to the people who were witnessing his condemnation of the Pharisees. And he tells them how he had often wanted to reach out and gather them together, but they were unwilling. There is the human responsibility that Paul is talking about here. But the possibility of their salvation continues. This is what he says in Romans 23:39. I say to you, says Jesus, from now on, you will not see me. They've rejected him. He's going to the cross and then going to heaven. Until, it's a really important word in the Bible. It denotes a period of time. Until you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. There's an until out there that Paul's going to be talking about further as we go through Romans chapters 10 and 11 here. But let me just say that we live in a very self-oriented, me-oriented culture. We are surrounded by an achievement-oriented culture. We honor work in our culture. I was one time in the Netherlands and doing some consulting work with a company in the Netherlands. Went to dinner with the principals of the company after a day at work, and they told me very frankly how much they appreciate the United States and Americans, and how Americans are risk takers and hardworking and persistent, and they never give up. And they really benefit from all that Americans do, but they want none of it. That's how our culture is seen around the world. Self-oriented, achievement-oriented, work-oriented. When the gospel comes to a culture like this, like you and I, that offers God's grace and says you may be saved and sanctified just through faith, it's unbelievable. And it was unbelievable to Israel as well. The unbelievable grace of God opens a narrow path of salvation and sanctification. People either stumble over grace or they welcome it. Let me challenge you. Which are you? You find God's grace something that is hard to believe, easy to understand, hard to live by? Well, brothers and sisters, I pray that you remind yourself daily of the grace of God extended to you. And you live by that grace, not randomly, not haphazardly, but by reading his book, the Word of Christ, and following what it says. God bless you, brothers and sisters. I hope this is useful for you. Again, it stirs my soul. I hope it stirs yours as well. God bless you.